So this is scene 10 of A Streetcar Named Desire, partway through the scene. So before we get to this point, Blanche is wearing a crumpled evening gown, and she's wearing scuffed silver slippers, which obviously are symbolic of her reduced financial circumstances, or you could think about it as a kind of disillusionment of her fairy tale. And she's trying to explain to Stanley here that Shep Huntley has apparently sent her a telegram inviting her onto a cruise of the Caribbean with him, and she's explained to Stanley how this has happened. And she says, I wore his ATO pin. Now that's a fraternity pin, so she's referring to a time when they would have been at American college together, which is a long time ago for Blanche. I hadn't seen him again until last Christmas. So we're talking, if we were to believe Blanche, about probably a 30-year gap, maybe slightly less, between seeing each other at a guess and suddenly he's inviting her on a cruise. So it seems unlikely, and we never know, do we, whether Shep Huntley is a real person and he really has invited her, which seems highly unlikely, whether he's a real person that she's embellishing the connection between them. Perhaps he's someone that she did know at college and wishes she kept in touch with, or whether the character is entirely fantasy. So the audience are left confused by the creation of Shep Huntley, and that is a really useful dramatic technique because it gives you a sense of what Blanche is feeling and at times what the other characters are feeling in relation to her. We don't know whose narration is trustworthy. So the problem is clothes. I tore into my trunk to see what I have that's suitable for the tropics. So again, this seems fantasy and highly unlikely. And Stanley says, and come up with that gorgeous diamond tiara. So I'd suggest this is sarcasm. And Blanche says, this old relic, haha, it's only rhinestones, which are fake jewels. Now, here we've got a kind of reversal in that at the beginning, she was suggesting that her clothes were genuine, and Stanley at one point thought that they were and had to be corrected by Stella in scene 2. And here we've got Stanley clearly, because of his sarcasm, here in the next line, gosh, I thought it was Tiffany diamonds, clearly revealing that he knows her to be fake. So this whole opening of the scene shows Stanley now knows the truth about Blanche. You can tell that in his sarcasm. And of course, fake jewels, you know, it's only rhinestones, are very much symbolic of Blanche as a whole. Something which appears to be of a certain class, but is actually fake. So that's symbolic of Blanche. Now he's come into the bedroom at this point, and that makes her feel quite uncomfortable. So he says he unbuttons his shirt, and notice there's no stage directions here, which is unusual. I think Williams is allowing the actors to think about how they would play this. And he goes on to say, it just goes to show you never know what is coming. So this is threatening. If you get a question about Stanley, it will be interesting in this scene to move between kind of humour and sarcasm. You know, this is mocking her, but in a relatively gentle way, talking to her as if you might a child. You know, oh gosh, I thought that was a real diamond ring, you know, to a toy. Here he starts to threaten her. You never know what's coming. And of course, this is a scene in which he rapes her at the end. He may be referring to that. He may be referring to his plan to kind of get rid of her altogether. And there's a really interesting, now if we look further down, shared lines here. They start to finish each other's lines. So if you've got a question about either character or you wanted to refer to the structure, just when I thought my luck had began to fail me, into the picture pops this Miami millionaire. So there's a lot you could say about the shared lines. In some ways there is a similarity between them. They are both traumatized, they are both disappointed in not having got from life what they thought they would got from life. They both suffer mental anguish. You can see that in scene 3 when Stanley breaks down. You can see it throughout the play when Blanche has moments of fantasy. But also it's very, very clear that Stanley at this point, by being able to finish her sentence, Stanley knows who Blanche is and the truth about her. This man is not from Miami, this man is from Dallas. Dallas, where gold spouts out of the ground. So, first of all, this emphasises that if there were a Shep Huntley, Blanche very much associates him with money and the importance of money to Blanche, because she needs someone for survival, doesn't she? But also there's an almost fairy tale quality like this. I think it's referencing a fairy tale of Dick Whittington, the idea that he went to London, the streets were paved with gold. Dallas at this time was front and foremost in the American oil market, and the big wealth was coming from Dallas through oil mining. I think that's the right term. Oil prospecting, not really sure, but either way, a lot of people making a lot of money out of oil at this period in history. And it starts to tap into Blanche's idea of fantasy. So, moving on, and Stanley again is quite dismissive of Blanche here. Well, just he's so from somewhere. He doesn't really care whether he's from Texas or wherever. And he starts removing his shirt. So, again, physically that's quite threatening. He's staking his claim on his territory. Close the curtains before you undress any further. This is all I'm going to undress right now. So again, there's another sense of threat. I may undress more, which is making her uncomfortable. And he starts to drink beer. Blanche has already been drinking in this scene. So, you know, the impact of alcohol on the play can't be overstated. Williams was an alcoholic, and he witnessed alcoholism within his family as well. So, you know, if you get a question about mental health or trauma, I think alcoholism or the impact of alcohol might be something to bring in, because alcohol is present throughout the play, and particularly in scenes of heightened emotion. She moves slowly towards the dresser where she stands with her hands knotted together, so you've got kind of tension here through the stage directions and the body language that Williams is asking for. And she starts to tell this anecdote about her family. I had a cousin who could take beer bottle lids off with his teeth, and then he broke his teeth, blah blah blah. And you can see at this point she is very tense. He's undressing, he's asking for more drink. She knots her hands together with tension, and she starts to tell a story. So there's an interesting connection here between how tension and fear triggers Blanche's fantasy life. So if you get a question about imagination or fantasy or realism, then that would work, wouldn't it? As equally one about Blanche. So here he takes a bottle of beer, and a geyser of foam shoots up. So this is going to break tension for the audience, because it will look silly him getting covered in beer. You could also argue that it's a kind of phallic symbol which will frighten Blanche further. Personally, I think it's just kind of comic. Remember that we can always talk about the presence of comedy in tragedy. You know, these moments where tension is broken. If you get a question about how Streetcar functions as a tragedy, that might be useful to think about these moments where tension is really, really built up and then suddenly broken. And think about the impact there on the audience. Shall we bury the hatchet and make it a loving cup? And again, that's quite a crude reference. And Blanche says quite primly, no thank you, because she is afraid. Now here, it's a red letter night for us both. You having an oil millionaire and me having a baby. And this seems fairly innocuous, but in its own way it's quite threatening. So red letter night or red letter day just means an important occasion. But red, I think the imagery of that symbolises, you know, passion, blood, anguish, fear for Blanche. You having an oil millionaire. So again, he's kind of mocking her, but there's a sexual reference there to having another person, and him having a baby. And notice it's me, not me and Stella, not my wife, not Stella having the baby. It's the idea of ownership here. And the audience are going to start to feel concerned about the impact of this baby on everybody's world. Stanley immediately takes ownership of it, not suggesting he would harm it, but again, he tends to see other people as commodities, doesn't he? So that will be an interesting point to raise if you get a question about Stanley. It's, as far as he's concerned, he is the one having a baby. He goes to the bureau, crouches to remove something. Blanche, what are you drawing in then? She's drawing back, notice. She's really frightened of him now. If you get a question about fear, this might be a good moment to mention. And the idea that he's in the bedroom as well, he's encroaching, you know, in the bedroom, in this very shared space that they all live in. And the setting really builds that tension, doesn't it? They're all in each other's space all of the time. So what Stanley's actually doing is getting out these fancy pajamas that he has. Here's something I always break out on special occasions like this, the silk pajamas I wore on my wedding night. And again, there's something slightly sexually threatening about this. That around her, he's now going to dress in his wedding night pajamas and all the symbolism of that. It doesn't seem to go with the innocent birth of a new baby, does it? Oh. When the telephone rings and they say, you've got a son, I'll tear this off and wave it like a flag. So he means his pajamas. So again, there's threatening there, the idea that I'm going to take my clothes off at some point in the near future, and tearing. You know, we know that on his and Stella's wedding night, he broke all of the light bulbs, that he's prone to these fits of rages. The idea of Stanley tearing feeds into his idea of a kind of predator or an animal kind of behaviour, and he will wave it like a flag. Now that's a really interesting turn of phrase. This simile here suggests victory. You might wave a flag, you know, when you win a battle in war. It suggests ownership, because you put a flag in somewhere to suggest that it's your territory. And again, there's no mention of Stella here. It's all about his baby. And he shakes out a brilliant pajama coat. And do you remember earlier he was described as a gaudy seed bearer? So here he is again, dressed in his fine, brilliant or gaudy clothes, all because of this baby being born. So there's a sense here that this situation, through the birth of a new baby, will continue. He's assuming it's going to be a son. In Stanley's mind, he's continuing his family line, and there's a sense that this pattern will repeat itself. You know, these men will continue to behave like this to these women. And Blanche reacts by saying, when I think how divine it is going to be to have such a thing as privacy once more, I could weep with joy. So she points out, just in case you've missed as an audience, the fact that they are all on top of her in this little apartment, and that she craves privacy. Remember as well that for the audience, you are looking at this apartment the whole time. The set never changes, so there is this real sense of claustrophobia in the play. You feel it alongside them, and you feel the tension rising because they're all on top of each other all of the time.